Good evening. Let's start with our motivation. Recently I was at a Trappist monastery and one of the monks there, one of the brothers, said something to me that's been rambling around in my mind ever since. And he was talking about people in this lifestyle as monastics, but I think it's actually true for all long-term Dharma practitioners, that we really grow and we learn in a certain direction that's wholesome and beautiful. But he was pointing out we also grow in another direction and sometimes make even more strong some of our unwholesome tendencies. And I thought that was really something to ponder as the years and the decades go by in our practice. But then how to look for that, because we're probably not aware, or maybe, I don't know, how to look for that. So I think these teachings that we've been focusing on the last weeks are quite important, and the detail of them can help us in this regard. And though when I first was asking people to memorize these 10 non-virtues and the 10 virtues, really what I was proposing was, because they're the causes of happiness, to abandon these non-virtues and to adopt these virtuous actions. But then think about, why aren't we growing more in our practice? And then when you think about the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, Eightfold Noble Path, we encapsulate it as the 3 higher trainings: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And I've decided, my own decision was that I need to return to these and look again at these 10 non-virtues and the 10 virtues, especially tonight when we do the mental ones. So this is a very important topic. We all want to be happy, and none of us really want to harm anyone else. And within our worldview that we're adopting and cultivating, we want to develop this concentration and wisdom in order to free ourselves from every suffering and to help others to do the same. So let's look with fresh eyes at our practice and at our minds, and really take to heart the depth of these teachings. So one thing that Venerable Children talked about in these teachings is that how helpful it is to know what a complete karma is, a complete action. And it helps us to put our actions in a broader perspective, really. We can know then, when we haven't done a complete karma, that it's not as heavy, right? It's not a perfect negative action. And this awareness is actually quite helpful And I've found this to be helpful. I remember when I worked on these transcripts in the past, this thing about knowing these 4 branches, because you can actually be in the midst of an unwholesome action, watching yourself doing it, being propelled, not able to fully stop yourself, but have some awareness of these branches, and just for your own self-interest, not complete the karma. For instance, sometimes we might find that we're overwhelmed by anger or something, but we could, if we didn't know these teachings, just give in to it and then rejoice about it, right? But most of us were bought into this worldview. And we understand, part of the wisdom mind kind of tries to assert itself as we try to, work with our afflictions. I find everyone here is working with their afflictions every day. I don't see anyone here that isn't doing that. We're just overpowered a lot of times, or not being aware, our awareness or mindfulness is not there. Many things can happen. We've gone over the teachings about how that we get into this situation. But still, there can be a corner of your mind that can have some wisdom going on, even in the midst of things. So you start to restrain yourself, and you make a point of not completing all the branches. So yeah, I've definitely found that's possible. Okay, so our quick quiz. Can anyone list the 3 destructive actions of the body?
Killing, stealing, and unwise sexual activity.
Killing, stealing, unwise sexual activity.
In that order.
Yep, in that order, right. And speech? Go ahead.
Lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle talk.
Lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle talk. And then tonight's topic, 3 of mind, covetousness, maliciousness, wrong view. Right. Okay, very good. Okay, so that's what we're going to do tonight. And so these are actions of the mind, so to speak, destructive actions of the mind: coveting, malicious intent, and wrong views. And these 3 are actually the result of the 3 afflictions of attachment, anger, and confusion. Coveting is the result of attachment. Malicious intent is the result of anger. And wrong views is the result of ignorance. When you carry those afflictions, those 3 poisons out to the extreme, that's where you end up. Okay? And these are things that we can do without saying a word. We don't have to talk. We don't have to move. We can be lying in bed. We can be sitting in a perfect meditation posture. You could be even sitting in front of the Buddha or your spiritual mentor, or walking in the woods. They're completely, purely mental actions. And so this is why we learn to observe our mind and to watch the mind. And it's, as we all know, it's the mind that motivates the actions of speech and body. So this is quite important. It starts here. And these 3, covetousness, maliciousness, and wrong views, actually can develop quite easily in our minds. And these are the things that motivate us to do the 7 other actions, the 3 of the body and the 4 of speech. Okay, so of these 3, wrong views is the most destructive, followed by malice or maliciousness, and then coveting. So they're in the reverse order from all the others, right? The other ones, the first one was the worst of the group. This is it's the reverse. So we're going to start with coveting, which is this attitude of, I want. And this is something that we're taught from the time we were young. And it's just in our culture too, more and better, more and better. And how am I going to get these things? And go out and do it. Boom. This is the American way, right? And now, of course, it's also good for our economy. So this is what coveting kind of looks like. So we're using this fourfold analysis, so to speak. The first one being the object or the basis. And so Tsongkhapa says that the basis of covetousness are the wealth or possessions of another. And Venerable Chodron talks about this as anything we desire. It can be things that belong to other people. It can be things that belong to someone else in our family. Or it could be something that even nobody owns. We can covet possessions, talents, abilities that other people have. And the worst kind of coveting is coveting anything that belongs, something that belongs to the triple gem, to the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha. And you wouldn't think that would be so easy, but then just look on the altar, and when you see some Swiss chocolate up there, your mind would go, looks pretty good. I don't think they'll miss just one little piece, right? Before or after offering? Yeah. Well, if it's on its way there, probably not so good. Well, are you asking a serious question?
You could ask, yeah.
Yeah, so is it coveting? It could be coveting before or after it's offered. I mean, when is before? Like in our situation here, the food is sitting in there. It's been offered to the Sangha of the 10 directions, and it's sitting in the kitchen. And our house rules are that that is not available for us. It belongs to the Sangha. So if you covet it there, the owner, according to how we talk about this in our monastic precepts, is the Sangha of the 10 directions. But then when we make those offerings to the Buddha, now the Buddha is the owner, and there's a caretaker, which is the person who sets up the shrine that day. So either way, it doesn't look so good.
Then if you spend the whole day waiting for that chocolate to come
Take the
off.
snack table.
Yeah. Oh, now afterwards, a little bit safer. Then we have it offered and available, but still you could have covetedness.
If you have coveted it all day.
Yeah, you can still have a mind of coveting.
Miss chocolate all month.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, and it starts with attachment, right? We'll get into that here. Yeah, or you might go into a temple and think, wow, they've got so much stuff in here. They wouldn't really mind if I take this or that. This would look so nice in my flat, right? They have a lot of stuff here. So yeah, so it's very harmful to covet things that belong to the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha. So that's the basis. Then the complete intention had the 3 parts: the discrimination or recognition, the motivation to do the action, and the presence of an affliction. So the discrimination is to essentially just recognize correctly the object that you're coveting. And the motivation is the wish to possess the object and make it your own. And the affliction can be any of the 3: attachment, anger, and ignorance to begin with. And in the instance that we were talking about above, where we were talking about we want that chocolate or we love these religious objects and we want to own one, in that instance, the initial poison or affliction is attachment there, right? We might think, oh, it would be so nice to have this. But the timely motivation, the one that you end with for this, for the coveting, as well as for unwise sexual behavior and stealing, although it could start with any of the 3, it ends and is completed with attachment. And then the action itself is striving at that contemplated purpose. That's the way Lama Tsongkhapa says it. Striving at that contemplated purpose. That's the performance. Where Geshe Sopa, I actually think for this topic, I finally decided that the best thing for a person to read is Geshe Sopa. Especially in some of the finer points we're going to get into tonight, the translation and the description is a lot easier to understand. And you'll see when I get to that point, I'll point it out. But some of these, when I compared them, and most of these I did. So he says for this, when you move from the mere motivation of wishing to possess the object to the actual endeavor to acquire it. The actual endeavor to acquire it. That's the action itself. Okay, so let's compare. The performance is striving at that contemplated purpose. That's what Lama Tsongkhapa says. Geshe Sopa says, when you move from the mere motivation of wishing to possess the object to the actual endeavor to acquire it, that's the action. And Venerable Chodron always gives kind of, she's big on examples. She says, here the thought is developing. And we might be thinking, I'm going to get this. I will do it. You're kind of moving forward, and it's a progression. The completion might be something like, I'm definitely going to get this, and this is how I'm going to do it. So we're starting to plan exactly what we're going to do. Like, I'm going to go in this store, I'm going to go in this section where they're selling this thing, da-da-da-da-da. And then Geshe Sopa's oftentimes more the clearest on these. So he says, the culmination of the action takes place when you resolve that you will make that object your own. That's an important point. It's the thought, I definitely want to have that thing for myself. In the beginning, the thought is not really definite, but it gradually develops until you get to the point where you firmly resolve to have it for yourself. This is purely mental resolution. There's no physical action necessary. And the following is a common experience. You see some object you like, you go look at it, admire it, and see how nice it is. You take it in your hands and look it over, and then you put it back down. Then you come back to it and pick it up again. You look it over some more. Back and forth you go. Then you come back to see it one more time. Finally, you make a decision. I definitely want to have it. This is the mind developing, right? Okay. So that's the completion of the action. And Lama Tsongkhapa says the culmination is thinking, may it become mine. And same with the Sangha, the determination that it will become yours. So this thing about ownership, may it become mine. So each of these 3 mental non-virtues have 5 aspects that make them complete. And if these 5 aspects aren't complete, then it's an incomplete karma. And so we're going to go through these on each 5. And these are the ones where the translations are interesting to read in Lama Tsongkhapa because it makes you think, and you don't know exactly what he's meaning. And then you go read Geshe Sopa and go, oh, okay, I get it. So we're going to use Geshe Sopas for the most part. So for these 5 things, I've noticed there's quite a progression. This is kind of a progression of going from attachment and getting stronger and stronger all the way to full, perfect 100% coveting. So the first one is you have to have a very strong attachment to your own possessions. So you like stuff. You like your stuff. And you have to, then the second one is you have to have an avaricious craving, an extremely greedy kind of craving to accumulate wealth, never satisfied with what you have, which is kind of where attachment, when it grows, leads you. You're never satisfied. The third one, and if you want to not write, I'll be happy to send you my note. You must have a mind that sees others' possessions as very fine and longs to enjoy these things. You're so attached to your own things that you want to accumulate more and more. Then you see what others have, and you experience a strong need to experience the pleasure of those things. So you see how it's growing? I like my stuff. I gotta have more. I'm not satisfied. Whoa, that's a cool thing. I want to have the pleasure of that thing. Then the fourth is you have a greedy mind thinking that whatever pleasurable objects others have, you yourself need to have. You need to own it. So it's growing again. And then the fifth, as a result of the covetousness, your mind is overcome by shamelessness, which we would say a lack of integrity. Your mind there's no integrity left. You've kind of burnt it out by having the afflictions get stronger and stronger. And you're oblivious to the need of escaping this fault. You're bought in, right? The covetous mind has no thought of integrity or shame. It does not recognize that this greedy attitude is wrong, so it has no thought of turning away from it. That's full-blown coveting. So this is good to know, because sometimes we've sat on the cushion, we go through these and like, wow, did I do this or not? You know, how far am I into it here? And you can see this progression. So if all 5 of these are present, as I said, the covetous mind is perfect. It's fully developed and complete. And if any of them is lacking, it's not a complete karma.
So does this fit, Venerable, into where the number 3, the affliction that is present, or is it somewhere between affliction and action, or is it going through all the branches as it's?
When you're asking about the infliction being
The
present,
difference between where they actually go, and you said they have to all be there to make it complete, but where, so they're driving the whole 4 branches, the bases, looking at the motivation, the affliction present, the action itself, they're all behind that?
I think it goes mostly, I think it might involve a lot of them, because the motivation is growing,
Attachment of some sort.
so your intention is growing, your affliction is growing, the actions are growing. Yeah, you know, the basis isn't changing so much unless you're unless you're adding more things to the list, right? Good to grow that way. And then, let's see, the other, let's go think about that. Recognizing the object correctly, that's probably not changing, although you might be recognizing it less correctly in the sense of you're having more attachment, but that's not what they're talking about here. It's just, it's a car. Yeah, it's a car. The motivation is definitely growing. The presence of the affliction is definitely growing. The action itself is going, propelled, and you're headed towards completion of the action. So yeah, you're doing parts of 2, all of 3 and 4, or just, yeah. So this is a little sidetracked, but I think it's important to put it in here. So I think Lama Tsongkhapa asked this question: what's the nature of the actual action that's taking place in a mental event? What is the action here, right? Because we think of action as speech or movement of the body. So for covetousness, it's just this process of going over and over your craving for the object until you make that decisive resolution: I will have it. This resolution, when it includes all 5 qualities just discussed, constitutes the actual action of covetousness. So this is the nature of the actual action of these mental events. And so a really good thing that Venerable Choidron points out is that you can see that with these last 3 branches that the complete intention, the action, and the conclusion, those all belong to kind of like one flow of thought, right? And it's just developing and developing, right? And it's not like, yeah, they're all related to each other, and it's developing and growing as it goes along. So does this mean that you can't go out and buy anything? Does this mean whenever you go to purchase something, you always have coveting in the mind?
That's my question.
Well, the answer is no. You have to look at the mental factors that are going on. You know, sometimes there's things that are useful and that we need. That's one mind. And then there's another mind that covets, wants, craves, plans, schemes, and connives. Those are different minds, right? So if you look in your refrigerator and it's empty, you might think, oh, I better go buy some food. And you go buy some food, end of story. But if you go to somebody else's house and they have a wonderful cherry pie there, you know, or like that story of the Kadampa who was in the house with the cookies and, gotta have those cookies, and he grabs his hand, thief! You know, that's because his mind was starting to go, that's not the same as, oh, I think the fridge is empty, it's time to go shopping. Now, you could get in the store and coveting could develop. I mean, it just depends on the person. Maybe some people don't have coveting for food. You know, like if you go to the hardware store, other people are gonna like, oh, I want this power drill, and you go in there and it's like, no problem, right? So, you know, it kind of depends on, yeah, you know, so, you know, it's not necessarily going to be coveting.
The question, though, really comes down to the difference between the identification of bases. Like, if Lama Tsongkhapa says somebody else's wealth belongs to somebody else, and Venerable says anything that you desire, I guess anything that we don't already have is already something somebody else owns.
Yeah, some things don't have an owner the way we talk about it, which is what Venerable clarified. None of the others clarified that. They made it sound like it had to belong to another. But I agree with her. This stuff on the beach that no one owns, that we're just taking by the tons to our homes, you know.
You can really covet that.
Yeah, you can covet that too. So it doesn't, I don't think it needs to be owned. So you can see that this progression of thoughts is quite imbued with this energy of coveting. And that's very different from, okay, I got to go, you know,
Yeah.
mail a letter and I want some more stamps. You know, it doesn't mean you can't buy anything. So that's what we have to learn to recognize in our mind. And then somebody asked her, well, what's the difference between coveting the qualities of the three jewels and the aspiration to develop these qualities? And she said, well, if the thoughts that occur the thoughts that might occur when you're coveting the qualities of the three jewels would be, I should have the love and compassion that a Buddha has, and then everyone will make offerings to me, and they'll think I'm such a great person, and you know, it's like that's very different from aspiring to have a mind of love and compassion. I mean, you can feel the difference just as I say the words. Because with aspiring, we recognize the qualities of something and the value, and we're recognizing it accurately. We're not like attachment, you know, is by definition is exaggerating or superimposing good qualities. When with aspiring, we're accurately recognizing qualities, and our heart is moving us in that direction. Coveting, you're overestimating the value of something, especially in relationship to ourselves. So, yeah, and then you're left with this very clinging mind, you know, that's grasping at things, wanting things. So that's, you know, you can tell there's a difference there. So, yeah, and then to aspire to have bodhicitta, we're not overestimating the qualities. And the feeling in the mind is much lighter, right? So I think we can see that. Okay, so they're very different mental actions, aspiring and coveting. And then someone asked about desire. Is coveting similar to desire? And she said yes, but coveting is a kind of desire that's clinging and grasping and possessive. So she says that's first-class desire or something, you know, kind of joking. So yeah, you can, in a lot of, like in the Pali Canon, they use the word desire sometimes for things that are like what we might use the word aspire. We tend to use the word aspire more, but there is doesn't have to be. Okay, so then we also, in each of these, we've been talking about the concordant experiential result, right? And that is to have intense desire and lots of craving. And the environmental result of coveting is small crops, the environment constantly deteriorates. Doesn't that sound familiar? Global warming. Okay, so now we're going to move on to malicious intent or maliciousness, which is thinking about how to harm others.
What's the concord result again, Venerable Charlie?
To have intense desire and lots of craving.
Bad result.
Okay, so now we're on to maliciousness, planning how to harm someone else, which we might want to do out of hatred and revenge, or we might do it because we're competing or rivals. We might have had a grudge against somebody, for example, and even they might have apologized, but we're still angry and we want to hurt them, we want to strike back somehow. So we're going to, the object or the basis is really any sentient beings. Tsongkhapa says, a living being in whom you can engender hostility. And then the complete intention, the discrimination or recognition, we recognize the sentient being. We recognize that they could be hurt if we did what we're planning on doing, thinking about doing. The motivation. Is kind of the desire to do these harmful actions, like, or even have these thoughts, like, wouldn't it be nice if they were killed or the resources were ruined? It's funny, Tsongkhapa puts it always as if somebody else was going to do it. Venerable Chodron writes it always as the first person. I wish I could harm them. Wouldn't it be nice? And this is the opposite of the four immeasurables. So if you were kind of putting the four immeasurables in this twisted form, it would be, may all sentient beings have suffering in its causes. And especially this person that I can't stand, right? It'd be things like that. So, not a place we want to go. And so the affliction is the same. It could be any of the three. But the timely motivation for malice here, as well as harsh words and killing, is always anger. And the action itself, the arising of malicious wish that harm should come to another person. It is the mental process of indulging in this kind of thought as it develops, increases, and becomes stronger. And then so you might be thinking, this looks really good, I'm going to do it, I'm definitely going to harm this person. And the completion is the culmination, or is a determination or decision to do whatever you're planning, beating somebody, whatever it is. So these five, I think, are quite helpful. So we're going to go through those again because I think they help us to see these things in our mind and watch it develop, right? Because everyone has anger, but we don't all have malicious thought going on all the time. And so if you can catch these little forest fires when they're small, a little, match going into a bush fire, going into a huge forest fire, catch them when they're small, it doesn't have to go on to all of this. But of these five, the first one, remember, if you complete all these five, it's a complete, perfect action. So the first one is you have to have a mind of hatred that grasps firmly as a cause or a reason why you want to harm a particular person. So maybe they did something to you in the past that damaged you and you have like an intense resentment. And you hold very firmly that what they did is a reason that you should repay them with harm, right? So it's having hatred, but also grasping this reason or what they did to you quite strongly. And then the second is you have to have a mind that cannot bear the harm. The third is you have to have a mind of resentment. And this comes about from recollecting and repeatedly dwelling on the reasons that you're angry. We can all see that. It's a meditation session sometimes,
So what's the third?
The third is this dwelling on the reasons for your anger and creating a mind of resentment. And the fourth is a mind of vengeance. Now you're getting to the thought of, wouldn't it be nice if that person were beaten or killed, something. So now you've meditated on the harm that they did, that you believe they did to you, and you feel the need to strike back, to repay it in some fashion. So you can see things are really progressing in your mind. I was thinking about this kid in South Carolina as I was preparing this and just trying to imagine what was going on in his head. And then the fifth is you must have a mind that is overcome with malice, oblivious to the disadvantages of such an attitude without integrity, and uninterested in avoiding such faults. So you can see that in some of these actions that we read about in the news. And we do this ourselves too, just in other ways. So when you have no countervailing thought challenging your revengeful desire to harm this enemy, then you won't have any kind of regret or hesitation or doubt. You're completely under the power of that thought. And that's the fifth and final element for complete and perfect malice. So you can see, again, there's this flow of the thought developing, right? Getting stronger, moving. In that one, it's quite easy. We have a lot of words for anger. It went from like a hatred to unable to bear the harm, to resentment, to vengeance, to just completely, bought in. No problem, no regret.
So resentment is dwelling over a long time. It's different than anger. It's more explosive. Or
The anger, I don't think, has to be explosive. It could be cold.
okay.
But the fact that you dwell on it for a long time will lead you to resentment. Because resentment is like an anger that is not going away readily. It's just like nothing has to happen. It's just there. I mean, all the stuff has happened way in the past and you're still holding it. It's like holding a grudge almost. Resentment was kind of similar in that way. You see the difference? Anger could kind of come and be gone.
Well, it says dwelling on the reason, so you're probably just proliferating over and over
Right.
again the whole scenario, exaggerating.
Right, the inappropriate attention that
Attention.
on something that's
Simmering.
simmering. But you haven't gotten to vengeance yet where you're wanting to repay it, really. So we have a lot of words for all of our nuances of anger, actually. Very, yeah. Our vocabulary is big. Okay, so one thing we can recognize here, both with the coveting and with the maliciousness, that it's not just having a passing thought. I think that's kind of reassuring, because a lot of times we're worried about our anger and our desire and our this and our that. But coveting and maliciousness, you've put a lot of energy into that thought. You've fed the thought, you're giving it fertilizer, everything it needs to get to the point where you're going to actually, you're setting yourself up to do the other 7 actions, right? Steal, kill, whatever. So this is why it's important that we catch these things early so they don't go like that. So the concordant experiential result is having a lot of hatred. And Venerable Chodron has always added into this persons with paranoia or fear or suspicion or lack of trust. I think she's probably right. The environmental result is a place with epidemics, disputes, dangerous animals, poisonous snakes, basically a dangerous place, which quite fits. So just to pause here and kind of remember that with all of these 10 destructive actions, pathways of action, it's important for us to develop our wholesome mental qualities, right? And 2 in particular are our self-respect, our integrity, and the consideration for others. And those are lacking when you can see that why our law system has premeditated crimes versus, it's a big point in a lawsuit is if something is premeditated versus just, like a rash that didn't have a lot of thought behind it, a lot of, planning. And so the way to cut into these things is to recognize when we're lacking integrity and to tap into our feeling of respect for our own values and caring about others. So when we have self-respect, we can know when it's in our mind, we can look at things and say, I can do better than this. I don't want to be like this. This is not something I want to be involved in. This goes against my Dharma values. It goes against my human values. Thoughts like that. So we're having really a kind of self-respect for our own humanity and our practice. Whereas consideration for others, we're actually thinking more about our impact on others and taking others into account. Like, if I speak that way, what might the impact be on another person? And I don't want to, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt their family. Or also, say for a Dharma practitioner, if I act this way as a Dharma practitioner, what is this person going to think about Buddhism? I mean, really, what would you think? It's partly why we wear robes. It's a protection. People see you. You need to clean up your act. You can't, everyone has these afflictions. We're no different than anyone else. But a lot of the things in monastic life are supports to help us. So there also are near enemies for integrity. So this self-respect, sometimes instead of having consideration for others or self-respect or integrity, we might more go into kind of a self-judgment kind of mode. And that's not really helpful. A mind of self-respect would say, I value my Dharma practice. I don't want to do this. Or I have the Buddha nature. I don't want to pollute it, right? Whereas the mind that's judging ourselves will say, I'm such a jerk, if I do this, and it's a very heavy critical voice. That doesn't help. And we can also twist this consideration for others, and it's mostly twisted by attachment to our reputation. We're more concerned about ourselves than others. Like, I don't want to do this because I care about how I look more than what my impact might be on them, is what it comes down to. So attachment to a reputation is an affliction, where consideration for others is not. So those are the things that really are powerful tools. And so we want to be aware of these differences of the near enemies, right? And when we're in a wholesome mental, and when we're sitting on the cushion or out and your mind's watching your affliction rule you, even though it feels like you're not doing anything sometimes and you're not winning the battle and the mind is still quite disturbed, applying it, this is one thing Venerable's taught me, applying it isn't so pretty. It doesn't happen in 3 minutes. But the fact that you're applying it over and over again makes a difference, and it adds up. And the thing, and what happens is you get more finesse with this and things go faster. I think most of us would say here, we have the same old afflictions, but we don't spend 2 weeks in them. And we could spend like 15 minutes in something that we might have spent 2 weeks in before, literally. Maybe it's 2 hours, maybe it's 2 days, but it could have been 2 weeks. And so what happens is, for me, even the intensity feels quite strong a lot of times, but the duration, I would say, much improved. You don't stay in things as long because you have more tools and you've developed them, and then they start having more impact. So that's one way to. Okay, so now we're on to the third pathway of action of the mind, which is wrong views. This is the worst of all of these 10, because it sets the stage for doing all of the other ones. And here, wrong views has a very particular connotation. It's denying something important that's true, or accepting something as true that in fact is not true. It has to do with our philosophical beliefs and our outlook on life. It doesn't have to do with our political party and things like that. So the topics that are of major importance here are usually things like karma, the existence of karma, the existence of the three jewels, Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, the existence or possibility of awakening, full awakening. So there are people, and we might have been this ourselves. I'm sure I was when I was young. I was like, if I don't get caught, it's okay. That's not having a moral conscience, right? So that gives you, that if you blow that up to other activities, it means you can do whatever you want, So if you didn't have, because why can you do whatever you want? Because there aren't any consequences. If I don't get caught, there's no consequences. That's the way that mind is thinking. There's no moral compass there. This view, which I certainly had as a child, I was like, just don't get caught. This is a view that is denying past and future lives, right? There's no consequence of my actions. That means that that you're actually denying that this is going to have any impact on that. The cause and effect of the karma is out the window, and the possibility of becoming enlightened, this view is denying that too. Because in this view, let's put it the other way, if you thought there was an ethical dimension to your behaviors, boom, that's kind of the definition of karma. And with that, you know that it's going to have an impact on future lives, and it's going to have an impact on your potential of becoming a Buddha. So by wiping that out, it's actually considered to be kind of a nihilistic view. These kind of wrong views, they all fall into the nihilistic side of things. And this is a very active process again. And so the mind of this full-blown is a very strong, stubborn mind, and it's full of misconceptions. And it's not the same as doubt. Doubt is a very normal thing in a Dharma practice, especially at the beginning, because we're actually always swimming upstream, and we're going through those stages of not thinking something is like we're just having wrong views, and then hearing these teachings and thinking, well, maybe yes, maybe no, but I don't think so. So that's doubt falling towards the wrong conclusion. Equal doubt, and then you get doubt that's falling towards the right conclusion, right? So that's normal in our practice. And the difference between them is doubt has kind of an openness to it. I want to explore the possibilities. It's not, you have the wish to inquire into things. Strong, stubborn views are ones that you don't even want to talk to the person. It's not worth having a conversation most of the time because there's no openness, there's no open door. You know, it's quite a different thing. And we've done a lot of interfaith, and you know, you can have completely different views and still talk to people, and people's minds can be open, and they can be very firm in their views. But it's kind of there's a different. I guess the motivation there is to find the commonality a lot of times, and to have a feeling of harmony between people. So I never have run into any kind of stubbornness. There's always kind of a sharing of trying to share in ways that how our paths can support each other. So basically, if you think about it, with these kind of wrong views, you're mentally giving yourself permission to do whatever you want. You can abandon ethical restraint. So in here, the object is existent objects. That's what Tsongkhapa says. That doesn't help me very much. So let's go with Geshe Sopa, as they're usually, well, actually, Venerable Children's was good here. For wrong views, the object is something that is true, that exists, and that we are denying. It could be cause and effect, karma, enlightenment, the triple gem, past or future lives, or anything of an important nature. Yeah, Geshe Sopa says this is the nihilistic view. So the complete intention, the discrimination is to believe that it is correct to deny things that actually exist. And the motivation is this desire to deny the existence of an existent object. So you might be saying, I don't believe in this. Which is why it's quite important in your Dharma practice for things, there's so many things that we don't understand, is try to watch the mind that gets rigid and the mind that likes to reject and that gets kind of stubborn and what's the word we use? Can't think of it right now. It's not a good idea to deny things in the Dharma that you don't understand. Rather than rejecting them, it's better to put them on the back burner. For some things, I put them there, and I find that if I can't deal with them in a positive way, I just leave them there. For other things, I work on actively to try to understand them better. And then I take those things out once in a while, and hopefully my mind will have changed a little bit. I try to do things that help me not to fall into this resistance. That's the word. I watch my mind resist things a lot of times. And so it's good to watch what's happening there so you don't eject yourself. You know, you can do that. People do. Because a lot of these things are, some of them are, what's the word? Extremely hidden phenomena, right? Like the specifics of karma are extremely hidden phenomena. You're not going to be able to see that. Even with reasoning, you can't. Like the example they always give is like, for you, the date you're born. There's no way that you can tell me from your own knowledge or even reasoning the date you're born. You need an authority like your mother, right? So that's an extremely hidden phenomena to you, but it's not extremely hidden to your mother. She was there, right? So all these things come back down to direct experience, but who's having the direct experience? If your mind is obscured, you're not going to have the direct experience of a lot of the things that we learn about in the Dharma until your mind is less obscured. Doesn't mean someone else isn't. So that's the example they give. So better to put things on the back burner. In fact, one of my teachers, her uncle, Deshan Rinpoche, he said one of the things that, and he was a kind of a Rimé, so he knew about all the different Tibetan Buddhist traditions and a lot about them. He said, one thing I never did was reject any of the teachings of the Buddha. And he made a big point about this in the writings that he did. Okay, so the timely motivation, the presence of an affliction can be any of the three mental poisons, but the timely motivation is always completed with ignorance. And so the performance, let's put it this way, the action itself is to engage in that wrong view. And again, this involves a process of contemplating and progressively cultivating that kind of thought until you actually hold that wrong view. So, so you might get to a point where you're saying, I don't believe this. I definitely don't believe in this, right? And so Tsongkhapa says that it's the initiation of that attitude for the action itself. So the completion will be a little different. There's this topic in here which, this is where I found that I would really suggest that people read these chapters, because then you can look at your own thoughts as they bring up examples. Like I didn't really quite relate to this part of it, but as I read the things that came after this, I thought, wow, yeah, because they gave examples of, we're talking about full-blown coveting and full-blown maliciousness and full-blown wrong view. But then they have examples of simple coveting, simple maliciousness, ones that are not full-blown. And that's where it's interesting to read and see, I wonder why they're saying that. I wonder if I think that, and just it helps us to see. And I think that one thing that's particularly good about Geshe Sopa's writings is, well, it's clear now from us who have gotten to know him, he had realizations. He was a realized practitioner far along the path. So when he says these things in here, it's always been my experience that it gives really good guidance that just sounds like it's talking right to you. And he does that in this chapter. He did it in the one where we were talking about what they call senseless speech or idle talk. Like he was very big on, what are you reading? Why are you reading these things? You need to protect yourself from reading these things. And he made very strong points. I've really thought about that a lot since since I started preparing that, and in the last week, because I thought, I need to clean up my act. To practice the path, kind of my point, the ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, which is the practicing of the path, if we're not kind of cleaning our act up on these things, we're never going to progress. And so they're giving us all these tips. And so we need to look at our lives and, how and especially since the internet is out there, it's like, what are we doing? Anyway, so this topic here, they talk about 4 types of performance of wrong view. These are the mistaken denial of causes, effects, activities or agency, and existent entities. So these are kind of categories of things, essentially, that we might have wrong views about. So for causes, it's thinking that like wholesome and unwholesome behavior don't exist, right? There's no good, there's no bad. For effects, it's thinking that the fruitions of these kind of behaviors don't exist, right? A lot of people don't, it's like, that's the thing. There's no consequences. It doesn't matter. If I don't get caught, no problem. The third one was the one that was a little harder for me. Well, that's agency or activities. We'll get to that. I'm going to delay it for a sec. Let's do the fourth one, which is existent entities. And this is thinking that things such as arhats, aryas, bodhisattvas, buddhas, liberation or enlightenment don't exist. These are kind of categories. This one, the third one, agencies or activities, the mistaken denial. The first one was the one that makes very little sense to me. The mistaken denial of the activities of planting and retaining seeds is thinking that there are no fathers and mothers. I don't know anyone who thinks that. Maybe you do. I don't. The mistaken denial of the activities of going and coming is thinking there are no former or future lives. A lot of people think that. The mistaken denial of the activity of birth is thinking that beings can't have a spontaneous birth, which basically is saying, I don't believe there's the bardo or the intermediate state. Well, a lot of people probably think that too. We haven't seen it, so how could it be? Right. So those are kind of some categories that are helpful to not reject, just work with, because they're not from our culture, a lot of them. Then the completion of the action is the mind that holds this view, holds the wrong view with a very stubborn, strong mind, full of misconceptions. Okay, so now these 5 attitudes that make a full-fledged wrong view. And this is, again, this thing that progresses. And actually, I decided they were kind of understandable in Lama Tsongkhapa, but much better in here. So I didn't have time to type them out. Okay, so the first is you have to have an ignorant mind that does not understand the way things actually are. You're confused and mistaken about the way in which the object of knowledge actually exists. I've really been thinking, because I was traveling, about this kid in South Carolina a lot as I read these, like what was in his mind, you know. Wrong views can really get you in a lot of trouble. It would have been wise if he had seen what it's like to spend the rest of your life in a prison. And actually I talked to somebody about this, and they have a television show about this that's kind of, what's it called? Something to help people get a clue about what it's like, so that they would, as a preventative measure, right? So that's, confusion, right? The second, you must have a mind that enjoys non-virtue, that delights in performing harmful actions. He looked very happy lighting that flag on fire and doing this and that. They showed that on the news a lot. This kid that shot those people in the church. He burnt an American flag and posted it on some social media thing. He looked very happy doing this. The third is you must have a mind that continuously engages in wrong thinking as the result of concentrating on incorrect teachings. Such wrong thinking describes a faulty reasoning process that leads to accepting a wrong view. Wrong view is generally described as holding impure things as pure, holding impermanent things as permanent, holding selfless things as having an essential, unchanging self. The process of reasoning along incorrect lines that produces conviction in these mistaken ideas is the type of mind that's being described here. So you've got some wrong teachings, and you're dwelling with them again, right? And then the fourth, this is a strange thing, you must have what is called a completely degenerate mind. Denies the value of all virtuous actions, including generosity, making offerings. You hold that these spiritual practices have no benefit or purpose. You even deny that virtuous activity itself exists. This is the low point of wrong view, and obviously has the potential of destroying all positive efforts. For this reason, it's called the completely degenerate mind.
No.
That's pretty intense. But there are definitely people who have gotten there. And the fifth is the mind is overcome by this kind of wrong view, convinced and confident, without integrity or shame, uninterested in avoiding such faults. When you possess these 5 elements of wrong view, it is complete, perfect, and fully developed. So, yeah, sad. Okay, so then the concordant experiential result is being born deeply ignorant. So this might be something like a mental disability, or maybe you have a lot of intelligence, but in a Dharma way you're ignorant. You can't, just doesn't go for you. And then the environmental result is a place with few crops. You lack a home and you lack a protector. Most of the people in prison are kind of in that boat. The food is never that great.
Sounds like a lot
They
of
never
work.
feel safe.
No homes, no crops, no protected.
Yeah.
Look at our whole refugee.
Yeah. Okay, so one point that Venerable Chodron makes is that these three destructive actions of the mind can't exist at the same time in your mind. You can see they all have a different base, kind of, which is why they boil things down to the three poisons. You can move from one to the other, but you can't have all three simultaneously. Okay, so she got into a long discussion where people were asking her about ignorance, and I think that we all kind of have the basic knowledge already that there's two main categories. One is the ignorance about the nature of reality, that things lack inherent existence, and the other is the ignorance about conventional reality, which is that there's an ethical dimension to our actions. So that's the short and long of that. But I think where I'd like to end is with these thoughts about how we can use these teachings to help us to examine our thoughts and see, like, why did Venerable write the book, Don't Believe Everything You Think, right? Because our minds are unreliable. We have many different kind of mental factors that come, and some are virtuous, some are non-virtuous. They're very contradictory, and these come, of course they come at different times, but even within an hour, you can have, you can sway in between the virtuous and the non-virtuous on one topic. And hopefully if you're practicing your Dharma practice, this is what you're doing, this is the point. So in one moment you might think there isn't any cause and effect, and later wisdom will come and say, oh, there is, right? Or I'm not going to do this because the integrity is there. Yeah, I'm not going to do this. And then it's gone, and like, hey, yeah, let's go, right? We all do that. So what we're trying to do in our Dharma practice is to identify these kind of thoughts and the feelings and recognize them first, like, oh, this is lack of consideration for others, right? Or this is consideration for others. Finding it in your mind, finding it in your own experience. This is mindfulness. This is confidence. This is anger. This is a grudge that I'm holding. We want, as we listen to the teachings, and especially these teachings, this chock-a-block full of things to meditate on, to first recognize, learn the antidotes to, but it can help us to evaluate the quality of our thoughts. Because just because we think something doesn't mean it's true. I mean, we're changing our thoughts about something all the time. I think I read all these alumni magazines on this trip, and most of medicine, some of their major premises change every 20 years, right? So there you go. That's good to know that. Okay, so what we want to do is kind of inject a little bit of doubt into this mind that's so certain that what you're thinking is true, and not take it all so seriously, so we can have some more spaciousness, step back and see, like, wow, how am I acting now? Is this really what I want to be doing? And one thing that's very clear is that we don't get instant answers when we do this, and sometimes, especially when the mind is, that's the thing that I think what makes it easy is if your mind is disturbed, it's afflicted. If it's afflicted, it's deluded. Makes it easy. But at the moment, you might not be on top of all of that, so you're just buying into it all. But as we practice longer and longer, we can look back, and sometimes it might take months, to look back on something and decide, like, wow, was I angry then, or was I being practical? Because it's not always so clear. So that's not abnormal, that's normal. Venerable Chodron talked about this in these teachings, that's happened to her often. And so I think that's kind of the main thing to take out of this, is to see, yes, we will be making mistakes, but there's no other way to follow this path. But we're going in the right direction. So when the mind the perfectionist comes in and thinks everything's supposed to look so clean and clear and concise, that's just not possible in a Dharma practice. It doesn't go that way. And you're not going to be enlightened tomorrow. So those kind of thoughts, they're unrealistic. Finding what's realistic in our practice really helps us to relax more, I think. And for me, these kind of teachings inspire me a lot to, I don't know, I find these some of the most hopeful kind of teachings, because I think, for my own thought is it's true that the ethics, concentration, and wisdom, as we clean up these things, because these are in the mind, then the other things, it'll be much easier to concentrate. The more we can concentrate, we might actually understand these teachings we're studying with Jeffrey. It's hard to hold that text, I mean, even he has trouble with it, and he's wrote it, or translated it. So anyway, I find that these are very important and very useful. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we close?
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this. It's been a whole wonderful review.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it myself too. I really think we need to think about idle talk a lot. It's just ubiquitous. Like, what is the point of reading this and then telling somebody about it? That's what I've been thinking about lately. There's a point where we need a certain amount of news, I find now, after having gotten away from it, but how much? Yeah. And then the one with the mental ones, I think I would really recommend people to, it's not a lot of reading in here. I mean, there's a lot more that they get into all these other topics around this that are fantastic, but it's a thick book. This book is titled Karma, the whole thing. It goes into a lot of different aspects of it. This is volume 2 of what will be a 5-volume series, Steps on the Path to Enlightenment by Geshe Sopa. Okay, we done? Okay. So, protect life, protect others' property, use your sexuality wisely and kindly, speak the truth, use words that promote harmony, use words that are kind and gentle, speak to a purpose. No, I don't ever say it that way. Rejoice in others' good qualities and be generous. Cultivate the 4 immeasurables and develop your conviction in rebirth, Buddha nature, and karma. And may we do this to benefit ourselves. May that ripple out to benefit others. And may we become fully awakened so that we can really be of the greatest benefit. But on the way, let's do what we can.